Water Ambassador Program. Water Ambassadors is a partnership program between Martin County, the University of Florida IFAS Extension Florida Sea Grant Program. This is our penultimate webinar for the 2025 webinar series. So we actually are going to be doing back-to-back webinars this week and next week. Next week, Vincent and I, your hosts, will be giving the presentation as well, and we're going to be providing an update on the Eason seagrass in the Indian River Lagoon Participatory Science Program. So hopefully you all can participate and learn a little bit about the program, and hopefully you can learn how you can participate in next year's Eason seagrass program. As always, we will be posting this webinar on the Martin County Extension YouTube page. Give us about a week after today's webinar and it should be up there. We ask that you use the chat feature to ask any questions, but feel free to put them in during anytime during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will go through in the order in which they came in. And today I am pleased to welcome back Amy Eason. She's going to be talking to us about Martin County's Integrated Watershed Master Plan Development. Vincent and I saw sort of a snippet of this presentation at the Indian River Lagoon Symposium, and we immediately were like, we need to bring this to Water Ambassadors to share it to a wider audience. So we're really glad that Amy was willing to talk to us today. Amy Eason is the Environmental Resource Engineer for Martin County. She leads the Resilient Martin and Water Quality Programs under the Environmental Resource Division of Public Works. She has 28 years of experience in civil and environmental engineering, with 11 years of experience working specifically in climate adaptation and resiliency. Amy has performed extensive stormwater modeling for design, permitting. She's overseen the construction of numerous water management facilities, and has implemented sea level rise projections in the design of such facilities. She's performed hydrologic and hydraulic studies and alternative analyses for stormwater system retrofits and flood abatement projects, and she has prepared stormwater master plans and vulnerability assessments. All of that's going to be discussed and integrated into the Martin County Integrated Watershed Master Plan, so we're going to learn more about it. Some of the municipalities that Amy has worked with include Miami Beach, Naples, Boynton Beach, Village of Key Biscayne, Port St. Lucie, and Miami-Dade County. So we are pleased to have her and learn from her expertise and about how she's bringing that to Martin County. So thank you, Amy.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me here to present this topic. It's a very important topic because stormwater touches so many areas of our lives, and we may not realize it, but it touches from site development to parks to redevelopment, and includes all sorts of departments within the municipal governments. So it's so important to be able to integrate different ideas together so that we can have a community that's whole. So I always like to start, explaining stormwater management, because that kind of helps us realize how everything's so interconnected. So I'll start with saying, stormwater is basically, the circle of life. We see it rains, the rain falls onto the ground, it either runs off as it touches these impervious areas that can't soak up the water. It goes into the groundwater system with pervious areas, which are your grass areas. It gets collected into lakes and streams. It can be evaporated, and then eventually it has to go somewhere. And most of the time that is the ocean. And because of that interconnectedness with the ocean, we really need to pay attention to how we analyze these systems. So there are several types of flooding out there. There is coastal flooding that involves the ocean, sea level rise, the tide, wind, hurricanes. There's also rainfall flooding, which it rains, the water gets soaked up, it runs off, it collects and floods, houses and such. And then there's riverine flooding, where you could have, the rivers collect it and then it goes over the banks and then impacts houses, similar to what we saw in Texas a couple months ago. And as we're looking at basic stormwater, there are things that we can manage and things we can't. We know that it's going to rain, and I always like to demonstrate stormwater management with a bathtub, because a lot of times when we're modeling and looking at risk to communities and how we're going to manage that stormwater, there's some key terms that we have to understand. We understand there's rainfall. That rainfall can, come over a duration of time. It can be really intense in some parts of the time. It can be less intense and over a long period of time. So for instance, like Seattle's known for having a lot of rain, but it's such a light rain that they don't have as much of a volume as we do in Florida. So it's kind of interesting that you're thinking of the state that receives a lot of rain, but yet from a year standpoint doesn't have as much as Florida. We also have to look at the rainfall as being like the shower head. So we're in the bathtub, it's raining on us, it's the shower just going on, it's hitting my body. Most of my body is impervious, so it runs off. Some of it's pervious, like the water may get into my hair and might stay there for a while, collect in there. The bathtub itself is the storage. So if we think of a basin, we have like the high parts of a watershed, and everything that falls within that watershed or that bathtub is then stored. Based off that bathtub, there's treatment, because we're using soap. We're trying to clean that dirt off us. There may be dirt along the rim, right? So we have to treat that stormwater. And then there's the conveyance part. It's got to go out somewhere. So we have this drain. Depending on that drain, it could be really big, which means the water will just flow out and can flow at the same rate it's raining, or it could be small and that bathtub just starts to fill up. And then there's tailwater, which could be, maybe there's a clog in that drain. So there's not much water able to go into the drain, because I have like hair like stuck into the drain there. So I would call that like a tailwater situation. And tailwater is very important, especially in the realm of stormwater management, is because that really impacts how we do our design. And that's why it's so important to do an integrated watershed management approach to this, because there's so many elements that we have to take into account. So if this is just normal day here, this is like a house over by the ocean, this is just normal condition. If we all of a sudden get this high tide, king tide, so it's your sunny day flooding, that water then goes up our conveyance systems, whether it's a pipe, a ditch, a river, a creek, goes up our systems and then pops out. So we call that sunny day flooding. Now imagine if we then add on top of that sea level rise and rain. So here's the rain, it's raining, we get a little bit more water into our stormwater system, and then we add the sea level rise, so things come up higher. There's also the coastal flooding part of this. So we can have wind waves that come in. It's raining, the waves hit against the system, so it could be a king tide, the waves pushing the water through the system, and then further floods the area. And then we also have storm surge, when we get a hurricane or a major storm, where that water can just push back inland. And then on top of that, we can have, again, sea level rise. So there's a lot of flooding that can occur. I've been basically doing, I call a road show through Martin County, kind of explaining our vulnerable systems. So if we were to look at Martin County today, this is tidal exposure, present day today. We're looking at 2024. bringing the sea level rise to present day. And it doesn't seem much. We're seeing these tidal floods. And actually, I did get a phone call last week on a street where the river is actually coming onto the street. In 2040, we can see that it encroaches further into the county, then 2070, and then 2100. And the reason it's important to look at these projections is because when I'm looking at my stormwater management system, and I want to make sure that I am protecting county assets, for instance, roads, a road has a 20-year lifespan. So I may design a system that takes into consideration a 2040, a 2050 time frame for sea level rise, and then design my stormwater system in that road to that particular lifespan. Also with buildings, I may want, if I build a new building somewhere, I'm going to want to make sure that that building can last for a long time. So I may look at a 2100 projection. So here in Martin County, we have, mainly our flow goes towards the Atlantic Ocean. So I'd call that a tier 1 discharge point. So we have very limited flow that goes directly into Lake Okeechobee that can be either circled back to us through the C-44 canal or go down south or go somewhere else. So I'd call those our tier 1 main discharges. A tier 2 would be, okay, the water goes into the next. So the Indian River or the St. Lucie estuary all go directly into the Atlantic Ocean. So does the Loxahatchee River. That would be your tier 2. A tier 3 would be looking at the North Fork St. Lucie River, the South Fork St. Lucie River. They all drain into the estuary and then to the Atlantic Ocean. And then tier 4. We are looking at doing a management basin plan approach of not only these major regional basins, but also the localized basins, because a lot of times, even when we're looking at these tidal fluctuations, when you look at a closer view of it, you'll see how much impact you actually receive within an area. So these are like our main watersheds that we have here in Martin County. And I'm just presenting some background information before I start to talk about the integrated management plans, just so that you can get a grasp as to why it's so important to integrate these things. The other thing that Martin County has are these regulatory programs that we participate in. So we have the community rating system, which is our CRS program. And this is a voluntary incentive program that is part of the National Flood Insurance Program. And with our voluntary participation within this program, we're able to do some actions that actually help reduce those flood risks. So we look at reducing flood losses. We want to strengthen the insurance program, and then we want to promote awareness. And there's a list of things that we have to do as a county in order to receive, which we are a Class 5 rating for the community rating system. So that means our homeowners receive a 25% discount on their flood insurance if they participate in the flood insurance program. The classes go from 1 to 10, and actually a Class 1 is better than a Class 10. So we're right in the middle. But there's also things within that class system that we can't quite get to, like a Class 4, which would give our residents more of a discount, a 30% discount, without doing a watershed management plan. And here at Martin County, we don't have a big, holistic, integrated watershed management plan. So that's one thing. We also have the Basin Management Action Plan. So there is a total maximum daily load for nutrients on the St. Lucie River and estuary and Lake Okeechobee. So this is dictated by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, which is also dictated by EPA. where we know that we have an impairment in these watersheds. So water quality is important because as we have stormwater hit the ground, it runs off and there's pollutants. So by having projects within a plan, we are able to receive credit and go towards the allocation that we are going to meet the total maximum daily load for the St. Lucie River and Estuary, plus Lake Okeechobee. Same goes for the northwest fork of the Loxahatchee River. That one's a different plan. It's called a pollutant prevention plan. And the reason it's different is because there's not a total maximum daily load on the Loxahatchee River. It's a volunteer plan, meaning that the stakeholders know that there's an issue and that we want to produce projects so that we can clean the Loxahatchee River. We also have the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and this is our discharge permit, basically, that allows us to discharge stormwater into waters of the state. And this particular permit, we have to do things such as, we have a fertilizer reduction ordinance. We have to maintain our storm systems. We got to make sure that we report that and do public education, which is why the water ambassadors even exist, is because based off that permit, this is our way to do our outreach to educate people about stormwater and what are the best things to do. For instance, let's not, wash a car in the driveway and let the soap go into the drain, right? We also have local mitigation strategy, and that is an emergency management function. So we have a list. It's a stakeholder group that gets together, and there's a list of projects that go into play to kind of reduce the flood risk within Martin County. By having a project on that list, we're able to receive hazard mitigation grant money from the Florida Department of Emergency Management. And then lastly, we have the Resilient Florida program. This is basically resiliency and doing adaptation plans that will produce projects. So all these items here produce projects and provide opportunities for Martin County to provide benefits to its residents and to reduce risk. So this is all important because I'm going to get to the question you are all here today is, what is an integrated watershed management plan and why is it so important? Well, it's a comprehensive strategy for managing land and water resources. It actually shows the interconnectedness of all those programs. So for instance, I just went through the CRS program, the Basin Management Action Plan, like all those items, stormwater is connected to it. And by having a holistic approach to an integrated watershed management plan, this allows us to hit these buckets, these programs to where we can reduce the insurance, we can meet our allocation for the total maximum daily load, we can actually produce projects so that we can actually tailor this plan so that it hits water quality, water quantity, and flood control and resilience all in once. And that provides us opportunities to go to each of these programs and try to receive grants. It also allows us to look long term. So we'll take a watershed and we'll look at the impacts that watershed will have over time with sea level rise, and then be able to discern what capital and projects should be done from a priority standpoint. It'll also have measurable outcomes. We'll be able to see where we're reducing that flood risk, and it's got to be adaptable because I can't predict what's going to happen in the future when it comes to sea level rise. So I'm going to have to be able to adapt this plan in the future. So the components of an integrated watershed management plan is basically those three things: flood protection, water quality, and the tidal conditions, sea level rise. So we're looking at all those things at once. And as we're looking at those things, we want to make sure that we accommodate level of service, which is something I'll explain later. It's how we can reasonably have the public understand what the design of that infrastructure is. It'll also have alternatives analysis. So we'll be able to do an existing model, look to see where it's flooding, and then do different alternatives for certain projects. It'll help us design our 10-year capital improvement plan. And on top of that, we want to make sure we do an economic analysis and a cost benefit so that we make sure that the money is well spent. It will also have to include operation costs because as we develop new projects, well, there's a cost to operating those new projects. We'll also need to monitor long-term what sea level rise impacts with us and what our water quality is doing. So hopefully as we produce this plan, we'll be able to monitor and see, are we reducing the pollutants to the river? Are we reducing the flooding? And then we may have to do some policy adjustments because as we go into each of these watersheds, we may find out that maybe we can't put as much impervious area in these watersheds and we'll have to limit the development on property. So I'll start with level of service. So what does that mean? It means what is the level of that facility is designed for? What is the level of maintenance that the public can expect? So we know here at Martin County, we have no flooding at the edge of pavement for a local road for a 10-year one-day storm, which means it's 7.5 inches raining within a 24-hour period. Our stormwater systems are designed for a 25-year, 3-day storm. That's the main conveyance system, the main pipes that go into the river or the ditches, and that's for 11 inches over 3 days. And then we have no flooding of buildings for a 100-year storm over 3 days, and that's 14.5 inches. Another level of service, and a resident may be out there and wants to know how often does that culvert get cleaned during the year? That's a level of service. How often are we dredging our canals or dredging ponds? How often are we sweeping our streets? Those are all level of service that Martin County provides to our residents. Also, what are the pollutant reductions? How are we meeting that level of service? The level of service of the St. Lucie River is the total maximum daily load. So we want to make sure that we're meeting that. And then we also want to make sure that we accommodate the lifespan of that asset. So for instance, roads are 20 years lifespan. Buildings, we want to hopefully make it to 100 years or more, right? An alternatives analysis is a way that we can look at the basin and we'll run a hydrologic and hydraulic model to see where are we today. And we'll see where the flooding is occurring. And from there, we'll determine what project should go where. So we'll try to figure out what the ultimate, like if I wanted to make sure that the watershed receives no flooding, say for the next 25 years, I want to make sure that I put enough projects on the ground for 25 years, or at least the lifespan of the project. In addition to that, we want to put projects in line to accommodate future conditions, for instance, sea level rise. For instance, if I was to, I'm going to throw out because I just came out of a meeting for Palm City. So if I was to look at Palm City and I wanted to look at where the river was in association with Palm City and thinking long term of where that tidal water is coming in, I may want to say, okay, let's raise Cornell Avenue today to this elevation so that I can accommodate any future flooding. Well, in 2070, it may flood even further. So maybe I'm going to need to put like a big dike around the river so that water doesn't come in through the river. And then I may have to put a pump system in to pump the water out. So those are the tipping points in trying to figure out what projects should be online today and being able to monitor what's going to happen in the future. So the plan will have all these projects in there, and it will lay out what could happen in the next 10 to 20 years, which is our capital improvement plan. So based off those tipping points, how we adjust and how we adapt, we'll be able to build that plan up. will be able to utilize what we call a triple bottom line process, which means we're looking at projects not from a lifespan, but from a community standpoint. We'd be looking at what's the environmental implications for that? How much money is it going to be? Is it permittable? Those are the things that we would be looking at from a triple bottom line process. So taking all that information, we want to make sure that the plan, the format of the plan, meets our community rating system. Because as I want is an integrated watershed management plan, and I mentioned all those programs, I want to make sure that this plan accommodates all those programs at once. So I want to make sure that it is in the right format, so that when I take it to our local mitigation strategy, they'll be able to say, okay, these are the projects, we're going to put them on the list, and then we're going to take that plan and give it to the emergency management division, and then hopefully we can get a discount on our flood insurance rating. So that's the importance of actually having it in the format. So we would do an existing conditions model, we would map that, we would look at future conditions. So future conditions meaning sea level rise, but it also means land use. So say that I had this neighborhood that's not 100% built out. I want to make sure that I take into consideration if that neighborhood was 100% built out, what does that condition look like? And then I want to also look at water quality. I want to look at what did the water quality in that watershed look prior to the St. Lucie River having a TMDL. So maybe looking at pre-1986 land uses. And then I would want to look at the year that the total maximum daily load became into effect, which is 2018. And then I would look at future conditions. So we want to make sure that we look at today, look at what's going to happen in the future, and then plan those projects for the future, which could mean that maybe in the future, we can't build as much as we want to. And then we would do those alternatives analysis. But the key to all this is public engagement, making sure that we get the public involved in the existing conditions model, making sure that they have their eyes on the ground and say, yeah, I agree with you. It floods there. Let's take care of it. And we want them engaged in the solution. So they need to understand what the existing condition is, and they need to be engaged in the solution because they may not want some of these solutions occurring in their neighborhood. And then overall, we'll develop that capital improvement plan and those projects and be able to prioritize that. So where are we from here? Well, we're going to try to implement this. It's a big task. It takes a lot to come. I mean, the county is really big and we have all these watersheds. And right now, our CIP budget doesn't account for us to do the entire county at once. So we have to prioritize. So we need to know what models exist in Martin County today. We've got over 60 stormwater treatment areas. So we do know that we have existing stormwater models that we can rely on, at least as a basis. And then when we do know where our known flood areas are. So this will help us prioritize which watersheds we should tackle first. And then we need to systematically divide and conquer these watersheds. Based off of funding with our CIP, how do we approach those watersheds? So for instance, I've got in Palm City, there's 5 projects occurring right now. So I want to try to make sure I'm ahead of the game before implementing those projects. And then I want to be able to compile all those watersheds because they all are interconnected in some way. They all discharge to the Atlantic Ocean, but they also discharge into each other. So we want to make sure that we integrate the plan and bring all those watersheds into the county as a whole. So by doing it this way, it actually increases and develops our capital improvement plan so we know long-term what the capital costs are. Not only that, we'll know long-term what the operation cost is. And then we'll want to be able to set ourselves up for these grant opportunities because by having it integrated, making sure that it touches all these points. And the reason it's so important to do that is a lot of the solutions actually are solutions that address flooding, water quality, and sea level rise all at once. So that allows us to go for multiple grants. So what kind of projects are there to actually help with this? There's water storage, ponds. There's the conveyance. We may have to increase conveyance, increase the pipe sizes. We may have to put pump systems in. There's treatments, green infrastructure kind of a treatment. There's nature-based solutions. And we may have to acquire some land in the middle of all this and do some policy changes. So typical stormwater infrastructure, I know I've shown this to you guys before. We see out there catch basins, culverts, swells, detention areas, curb inlets. These are all things that will help provide solutions to making sure that we're meeting level service and completing all those programs. There's other stormwater infrastructure such as a dry detention pond, exfiltration trench, rain gardens. And there's also, adaptation projects such as raising roads, raising seawalls, doing more living shorelines, pump stations, berms, floodproofing. These are all solutions that can be developed as part of the Integrated Watershed Management Plan. So I hope I did a good job explaining how all these are connected and how it's important to do a plan that's holistic and considers all of these at once. So I'm welcome to answer any questions or have any comments that the public may have on the presentation. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Amy. We do have a couple questions in the chat. And while I get those started, I am going to also launch our evaluation for all of your participants. So the first question is in regards to the community rating system. The question is whether or not this is something that the county participates in for residents to take advantage of, or does the county participate and then the county receives that discount, which is then reflected in residents' taxes?
That's a good question. I do not know the answer to that. It's a discount program, so I think, and I'm just hypothetically because I'm not 100% sure on it. I think because if you purchase the flood insurance, it's already taken into account for that. So if the same insurance person was in another county that it didn't have that, I would say it's probably already taken into account. But it is a program that we do for our residents. So we don't have to do it. We do not have to participate in this program. It is definitely something we do for our residents.
Great, thank you. The next question is, does the watershed management plan consider ongoing development approvals or vice versa? The rationale behind this question is that the individual is concerned with ongoing development approvals that reduce surface area of land and infrastructure to absorb flooding.
So what happens is, excuse me, I mentioned the existing condition model. So that would be based off existing conditions today. And then we would look at future land use. So if Martin County already has in their future land use areas that would be developed, like this is zoned for industrial or this is zoned for residential, and that land use would already be taken into consideration in the plan, whether there's development there or not. So if for some reason I get a watershed plan completed and Martin County has its infrastructure in place, or at least planning those projects in place, it's almost like if I was to do like a blanket development, like I had brand new land, I would be doing a conceptual environmental resource permit that would already consider my future land use, right? And I would know that my stormwater system can only handle that amount of development. So it would be similar to that. So I would be taking each watershed, looking at future land use, and understanding that that's the amount of development planned at that moment. And if a developer came in and did more than what was originally in that plan, then they would have to provide more to compensate for that. But that's a policy decision that would have to be made as we're doing each of these plans, because some of these watersheds don't have room for development.
Great, thank you. And the next question has been, since I believe Amy answered your questions. Okay, so we're good for that one. The next question is, are swales required to be grass?
Are they required to be grass? They
I guess,
prefer
is
to
there
be
another type of
grass.
vegetation other than grass that can be planted in a swale?
So you got bioswale. So it depends on, going through the permitting process, but those are solutions. A bioswale is a solution similar to rain gardens, to where they are a planted swale. What you want to make sure is if those solutions are used, that you have enough storage within the swale to compensate for it. So for instance, it's not, hey, here's a swale, I'm just going to put plants in there, right? I want to make sure that the bottom of the swale has like fine sand with some bigger I guess soil kind of type, so that the pores aren't compact. And then I would want to make sure that then I have the plants on top of that. So you could put, we call it it's called BAM, bio absorption material in it that actually absorbs some of the water quality. You could do something like that. But the reason that there's mostly grass is so that we can treat the water and it can go into the groundwater system. So it just depends on where you are, whether you can do a planted swale or not. But those are all solutions that can be used.
Great, thank you. The next question is regarding public engagement and education. What specific solutions do you want the public stakeholders to do to help solve the flooding problem, separate from what the county and municipality needs to do?
Yeah. So what happens with these watershed plans is that you would have a first touch of, hey, here's the existing condition. This is what we're seeing in your community. Do you see that as well? The second touch would be, okay, we're developing projects in the area. It'd be almost like a charrette situation, because you'll know where the problems are, and then you'll be able to say, okay, what makes sense here? Does the community want more rain gardens? Does the community want more ponds? So there would be opportunities for them to do what I call dots on the board exercise. There'll be several solutions where they can put their preferences on the board. And then we would take that back as we're developing the projects to make sure that we implement that. They may know areas within the watershed that they would be interested in having like a park system. That's why it's so important to include different departments as well in it. The other thing that would be part of this plan is looking at vacant land. So where are those opportunities that either Martin County has land available to do something, or Martin County may have to purchase land? And then that will need to have community engagement as well, because maybe some of those landowners may not want to sell their land. And those are opportunities that we would be looking for. So from the public standpoint, we would be wanting to know, for instance, are these projects something that they would be okay with? Like, some people may not want a pump system, but at some point you have to switch to that because sea level rise keeps occurring, and otherwise everything's going to have to be built up, right? So that's the kind of public engagement that I'd be expecting from the public, is to help us develop this project.
Great, thank you. And is it fair to say that at like the residential property scale, residents can engage in similar types of things like rain gardens and
Correct.
permeable surfaces and that
Yeah,
type of?
yeah, and that's something that I would love for us to really look at, is from a residential scale, what can we do? I know personally for me, I actually put like a French drain system in my backyard, which helps because it brings the water into the groundwater and it's not running into my patio. So I actually built that system and planted it and all that, and that helps. And I can envision, even in like these HOAs or POAs, that maybe they will allow like rain gardens along the edge of curbs in front yards to provide that opportunity to reduce the flooding, because there's going to be some of these neighborhoods that Martin County we don't have jurisdiction in, and we're going to have to provide solutions to the communities for them to implement on their own. So yes.
That actually ties in nicely to the next question, talking about jurisdiction. Um, is this plan in Martin County coordinated at all with neighboring counties, such as Palm Beach, for example, or St. Lucie North?
So we have, as part of our resiliency efforts, have been in coordination with South Florida Water Management District doing, they're in the middle of doing a flood protection level of service study for St. Lucie County and Martin County and the north part of Palm Beach County. So we are coordinating together to see their outcomes. And I've also given them all the information to do their analysis that we have. So we have been coordinating those efforts. But when you're looking at the smaller watersheds, that's mostly Martin County. There's not a lot of crossover. So if we look at the north side, we have the C23 that separates St. Lucie County and Martin County. So there's not much of an integration there. And then down south, you have the Locatachie River, which there's some integration. So a lot of it's separate, but from a basin management action plan, we have our own allocations that we take care of. And there could be crossover in the future because the state did create a statute on water quality trading credits. So they're not a good idea, but it is something that is possible.
Okay, great. We have a question about, is there a concern about spraying of chemicals to remove weeds in ponds? And does that seep into our groundwater?
Yes, there is a concern. One thing we do have, we have a fertilizer ordinance that is part of our MPDS program and was part of us getting some credits from the Basin Management Action Plan. That is in place today. As for spraying weeds, of course, I don't like the idea, but it's not something that we look at it from a nutrient standpoint. So when we're testing the water, that's when we'll start to see some of that come in. But right now, we do have a fertilizer ordinance. We want to make sure that we're not over fertilizing. I know personally, I don't fertilize my yard. My yard does pretty good. So we get enough rain, it's pretty good. So it'd be good to have a campaign that says no fertilizer, but that's what it is.
Would you be willing to present to HOAs? Is there an opportunity for that?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Then we will.
Absolutely.
Maybe Vincent, you could put Amy's, or is it okay if we put your email address in the chat for participants to contact you? What's the best way
Sure,
to
they can
contact you?
contact me through that. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
if this is something, I know personally I would like to, because it's gonna be hard when I start to look at these plans. There's gonna be HOAs that have environmental resource permits through South Florida Water Management District that have been long-standing HOAs that may not understand that you have to dredge your pond to help reduce nutrients. And those ponds only last 20 years. They actually prefer you to do something with the ponds, every 10 to 15 years. So that's something that an HOA needs to be aware of and actually program that in. So yes.
great. The questions keep coming. So you're doing fantastic. Such an engaging topic and group. Okay, the next question, is, I guess in general, is there permeable concrete? And I'm going to add to that. If so, is it being used in Martin County?
But there is pervious concrete, and I believe pervious concrete was done lately on the Map Road project in the parking areas. They did pervious pavement. They've done it on some of our streetscape stuff, I believe in Rio. So, and I think at one point but that's City of Stewart. I think the Publix off US 1 north of the bridge had pervious concrete at one point. So yeah, it's being used.
The next question, I might actually need a sort of additional information to help you answer this. But the question is, do you have suggested drafts of newer ordinances that county or cities can incorporate? And so, Liz, I don't know, are you specifically talking about fertilizer ordinances, or if you could maybe add a little bit more information to what you were thinking when you wrote that question? And then while Liz is addressing that, I just wanted to read out the last comment, which is very informative. The health of our watersheds define the health of our water bodies. We look forward to coordinated development of an integrated watershed management plan. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I
oh,
mean,
and Liz said either flood or pollution ordinances.
yeah, so the only thing we have right now, we do have some ordinances in place with our MPDS program. They're older. They probably need to be revamped a little bit. We do have development ordinances on how much storage you need to provide when you're developing a property. A lot of times we actually take that to South Florida Water Management District, and they do. But as we're developing these plans, it's the reason it needs to be integrated is because that lets us look to see what ordinances we need to do and develop. So I would say right now, no, we don't have any new stuff or model ordinances, but I do know that there's communities out there that have.
Great, thank you. What is the most effective way to be involved as a resident? The educational piece has been so helpful in just understanding some basics, but it still leaves me in the what's next. This is for this
So
participant's own, interest and involvement.
yeah. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I mean, look at what you're putting on the ground, right? Don't over fertilize. Don't wash your car in the driveway. You know, things like that that help reduce the pollutants. Any opportunities that you can do to make sure that the rainwater stays on property. So doing French drains or exfiltration trench or something like that will help from a personal property standpoint. But public education, I think, is the biggest thing. I go into some of these communities and people don't understand stormwater management at all. So I hope that the person who asked that question, yeah, bring it to your community, bring it to your people. I know that when we were getting a lot of Lake O discharges, and I just hear people in restaurants, and I'd interject to kind of educate, and they're like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that." So it's good to just get the word out. Yes.
Fantastic. I think it's the end of the questions in the chat. Maybe if we can leave it one more minute just to see if any last minute questions come in. Otherwise, I want to thank you, Amy, again for a fantastic presentation and for a wonderful Q&A session. It's great to show that there's interest and see that there's interest and people want to participate in their community. So
Yeah, definitely. I'll stop. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
And while we wait for any last minute questions to come in, Vincent and I just want to remind you that we have one last webinar and it is next week. So it is, we're sort of going off of our regular monthly schedule to get the last one in for 2025. So we hope you'll join us there. All right. Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you everyone for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Amy. Want me to hit stop record?
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot all about that.